Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello everyone and welcome to Bouncing Back, the Personal Resilience Science Insights podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. Let's get started. Hi everyone and welcome. I am your host Tia Harmer and today we are here with Christopher Shen to discuss how self-esteem affects your personal resilience. Hi Christopher, how are you?
I'm outstanding, Tia. How are you?
That's wonderful. I'm outstanding as well. So for those who don't know you, do you mind summarising who you are and what it is you do?
Thank you very much. My name's Christopher Shen. I'm a psychologist based in Melbourne. I have been practicing for approximately 28 years or so. I am a private consulting psychologist. I see my valued patients. I also provide organisational psychology services as well and performance psychology. I'm team psychologist with the Western Bulldogs AFLW women's team and also their tackling coach.
That is incredible. So for those who didn't catch all of that, he is a very, very intelligent man. So as mentioned, today we are discussing self-esteem, and that is something that is very important to your own well-being and happiness and health. So before we discuss this further, Christopher, how would you define self-esteem?
Thank you. Self-esteem can be described as the feelings, thoughts, and emotions we hold about ourselves. When we have what might be described, Tia, as positive self-esteem, we have a picture, an image, and a belief in ourselves that is beloved, that is hopeful, that is optimistic. When we are experiencing low self-esteem, we may have regard for ourselves that is critical, that is low in its self-deprecation, and also may be quite harsh.
That is an incredible definition. Thank you for that. So we're going to discuss a little bit more about self-esteem and how that works with personal resilience as we get further into the podcast. But right now, we're going to do some rapid fire questions. We do these with all our guests so that listeners can get to know you a little bit better. And I find that very interesting things tend to come out in the rapid fire questions. So what I'm going to do is I'll just ask you a question and then you share pretty much the first thing that comes to mind when you hear that question. Are we good?
Please.
Ready? Awesome. Okay. What is your favourite book?
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. Oh, that's really interesting. Okay. That is incredible. Very nice answer. What is a movie you would recommend?
Coach Carter.
Coach Carter. Okay. Is there a reason or you have like a nice emotional attachment to this movie?
Coach Carter was a film with Samuel L. Jackson that was produced in approximately the late 1990s, where it's highly inspirational, highly motivational.
Yeah.
Tia, where he portrays a coach, a basketball coach of a downtrodden high school team in a town in America, and a town where the youth have a high likelihood of going into crime, being jailed, or actually dying in crime.
Yeah.
And he's able to inspire those players to aspire for something more, to undertake good grades. In fact, he brings in rules that they can only play if they have good grades, and to aspire for something much greater than what they previously had settled for. It's really, really inspiring.
That's gorgeous. I feel like we all need someone like that in our lives.
Indeed.
Okay, so what is a recent podcast you have been obsessed with?
Apart from yours.
Apart from ours,
of course.
obviously.
The celebrity Conan O'Brien has a podcast. He's recently finished his late night shows during the pandemic, and he has a podcast called Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend, where he will interview one of his many diverse friends from other entertainment areas or celebrities or even just family members. And they're witty, they're unique, and they're really, really illuminating.
That sounds great. What's that one called?
Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend.
Conan
I actually
O'Brien
believe
Needs a
it's just under Joe Rogan's podcast as the most popular podcast.
Oh, that's amazing. All right, have to definitely listen to that one soon. What's your favorite documentary? I always like this question.
Netflix recently released in 2021 a documentary on Michael Jordan, the amazing
yes.
basketball
I heard about
player
this.
for the Chicago Bulls. And it was a depiction of his champion years where they made a three-peat in winning the championships. And it's a real expose of the inner sanctum tier, so you can see the way his demand for excellence actually has a negative effect on some of his other teammates and support staff and coaches, yet how his talent and drive for excellence is also demonstrated and embodied. So it's a unique window into time.
That's so interesting. I heard a lot about that documentary when it came out, and like you don't have to be a sports fan to like watch it. Like you don't have to be
Indeed.
familiar with him to be able to watch it and understand it and just kind of see how it applies not just to like basketball but other sports and that kind of mindset. So yeah, definitely one I would recommend everyone go have a look at. Okay, final question. Who is your famous role model outside of yourself?
I'm a huge fan and have been since I was a youngster of the Chinese American martial artist Bruce Lee and the way in which he gave Asians all across the world a strong role model of somebody who, and not just Asians, he's been beloved by cultures and ethnicities all around the world. And of strong note, African Americans have been enormously drawn towards him as well. So Bruce Lee, for his ability to strive and reach a level of excellence in film as a martial art actor and also as a martial artist himself.
Awesome. That is a very good answer. Okay, so moving on, we're going to have a talk about sort of self-esteem practices and habits. And so it's sort of looking at experimenting with self-esteem and seeing sort of what kind of habits you can draw out to help yourself have a better self-esteem and have a better healthy mindset. So we're going to start with a quick breakdown of habits that help you specifically with your own self-esteem. So this is a really important practice for everyone. So I'm really interested to see kind of what your answers are to the questions. So first question would be, what is the practice that you do to improve or sort of cultivate your own self-esteem?
Research consistently demonstrates, Tia, that adopting an attitude of gratitude towards others, also self-gratitude and self-compassion towards yourself, immersing yourself in gratitude increases our positive thoughts, feelings, and emotions. So a daily practice that I undertake is to look for opportunities to express validation, thanks, and appreciation to others in my life.
That's beautiful. I think we should all do that. So what are 3 good things about this practice?
Fantastic. And I commend you for the very good question of the 3 good things, which is a very nice positive psychology practice. The three good things of adopting an attitude of gratitude activity are that it uniquely disrupts the phenomenon of negative rumination, which is the practice where we often brood about negative things, people and events in our life. And what expressing gratitude does, or accessing gratitude does, Tia, is it uniquely disrupts the phenomenon of negative rumination. Because in order to be grateful for something, we immediately think and experience associated thoughts, feelings and emotions about the recipient of that gratitude.
Yeah, positive emotions.
A second good thing about adopting an attitude of gratitude is that it releases neurotransmitters in our brain and into our bloodstream, often described as endorphins, which help us feel positive, and it creates a lasting effect. And a third good thing about adopting an attitude of gratitude is that it becomes infectious, and it often evokes positive responses and other grateful sentiments from others around you.
Yeah. So when you talk about sort of having that sort of gratitude activities, would that be like where you write down like things that you're grateful for, or is that kind of just something that you sort of do at the end of the day, or is there like a specific kind of activity where you cultivate that?
Great question. It could be any of those things. I recommend to, in the moment, look for opportunities to express gratitude. Yet I also recommend a daily regime. And that includes near the end of the day with a beloved person to actually express 3 blessings or 3 good things, and the reason or the causes for those 3 good things to that beloved person, and then ask him, her or them to reciprocate. Another daily regime is to journal and to identify and write or record and dictate those events, people, companion pets, nature, anything and everything that we're grateful for.
Yeah, that's great. I know a lot of families and friends at the end of the day, especially, and my family do this as well, you know, you sit around the dinner table if you're having dinner together and, sorry, voice is leaving me today. And you sit around, and my family used to be like, even if you had a bad day, what was something good that happened to you today, or what was something nice that you saw? And I think that's always good, because you do have to kind of like think about and like bring forward those positive thoughts and emotions.
Tia, let me strongly endorse that family practice and commend you and your family, because even when times are dire and we're all experiencing some tough times at the moment, we can still endeavour to identify some blessings or some good things.
Yeah. So are there any challenges that come with this practice?
Patients that I've recommended this practice as a daily regime sometimes report that they are so mired in depressive or anxious thoughts, feelings and emotions, T, that they actually can't identify anything. Yeah. And then they start panicking and becoming worried that they can't identify anything. Yet what I gently yet firmly encourage them is to identify something maybe overarching, like nature or animals, or indeed books, music, shows, anything or everything that they've enjoyed before. And often when you recommend for them to contemplate such things, they're able to then identify, oh, I am grateful, I do enjoy that show or that music or sound, and then that relieves them.
Yeah. So how often do you practice this?
All the time.
Okay, all the time. Every day.
So you may have noticed when I met you, I thanked you, our operator today, the outstanding Jerry. I thanked him for welcoming me and looking after me.
Yeah.
So all the time.
That's beautiful. So I know you said all the time, but is there a certain time that you would maybe like set up and sort of sit down? Because I know some people like journal and they make like a certain
Sure.
time for that. You sound like a busy person, but is there a certain time that you ever set up for you or like with a loved one where you're like dedicated
Absolutely.
to this time?
Absolutely. In addition to that practice of always looking for opportunities, in addition to that, a really helpful regime to overcome the phenomenon of brooding about negatives, that negative rumination phenomenon I referred to earlier to you, doing it just before you go to bed in your pre-sleep routine with a beloved one, such as your partner or your family members or a housemate or a friend. Doing it then just before we go to bed is particularly helpful. And the reason and rationale for that helpfulness or of that practice is it disrupts anything and everything that's been going on in your day, particularly fatigue or tiredness, and you access the memories and associated thoughts, feelings, and emotions that are related to that person or pet or animal or nature or event that you're grateful for. And then that also leads to good sleep.
Yeah. And good sleep is really important. So, how do you think this kind of daily practice can impact your personal resilience or your perception of personal resilience?
Greatly. Research demonstrates consistently that adopting an attitude of gratitude can diminish symptoms of depressive thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and that positive effect can last for up to 6 weeks or so. So the answer to that is it greatly can impact and improve our resilience.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Big impact. Up to 6 weeks. That's really impressive. So, based on your experience, do you have any other recommendations for people to kind of combine this practice into their day or things they can do to improve
I
on
certainly
being
do.
more grateful? Okay.
I certainly do too. As well as the gratitude practices, we can also adjunctively, we can actually build on those with what is described as savouring practices.
Okay.
So T, if I asked you, what does the word savouring mean for you? What would you say?
Oh, that's a good question in terms of savoring. I
For
think it
example,
means,
a meal.
okay, yeah. For me, savoring just sort of means making sure that when, especially if I'm eating something, and I feel like this is sort of like something that stems from childhood, is when you've got something good and you kind of like eat all the stuff like around it. And then when you get to that thing, it's like, like I'm going to appreciate this and I'm going to make sure that I
Outstanding.
enjoy this.
Outstanding. That's a tremendous notion and description of savouring. Savouring sometimes is described as being present. Other times it's described as really making sure you cherish
Yeah.
and appreciate the experience, the flavours, if it's something like food
Yeah.
or beverages. So I really like that practice. Savouring practices are described as strategies that we can use to create, maintain, grow, and share positive thoughts, feelings, and emotions.
Okay.
And that might be something as simple as a gesture or mannerism, such as fist bumping someone, so
Yeah.
smiling at someone, more likely in a workplace, bidding people hello when you greet them at the start of a work shift,
Yeah.
and bidding them
always
farewell
nice.
at the end of their shift. It can be music and putting together playlists of music that create a particular emotion or feeling, and then putting together different playlists that create other feelings. Listening to sounds. There's a lot of pre-recorded sound apps now that are tremendous. My partner Mia and I really enjoy listening to forest sounds when we go to bed,
Okay.
and listening to the bird song and the crickets
that's
and
nice.
everything like that. And the use of affirmations and positive words and images. So anything and everything that creates positivity is described as a savouring activity. And those savouring activities, in addition to the gratitude practice, really can help us lift and grow our self-esteem and become more resilient.
Yeah. That's incredible. That even just having that conversation just made me feel like, yes, I feel so much. I feel great now. And yeah, it's really important to have these practices in every day. Like obviously I don't live at home anymore, but like even I live
Actually,
with
that's
my
not
brother.
obvious to me. I don't know that.
Well, yeah, I don't live at home anymore, and I live with my brother, and we still like, even though we're not with our parents and our other siblings, we still make sure that like if we're making dinner together, oh, like what's something good that happened to you today, and it just does elevate the situation, and your mind is able to kind of just sort of dwell in those happy thoughts, and especially before you're going to bed, and I think that helps, like you said, with sleep and actually being able to fall asleep. Which we're going
And
to
have
talk
good
about.
dreams, Tia.
Yes.
The sleep research is vastly contradictory. However, I've worked with several sleep doctors with my patients because one of the consistent symptoms of anxiety and depressive disorders is fractured sleep. And I've asked them, as I've described the practices I recommend, will saving practices just before bed lead to better dreams? And the response is yes.
That's amazing. That's really, you always want to have good dreams. No one enjoys having nightmares. So I think
Correct.
if you can do that one thing before you go to sleep and it's going to change the outcome of your dreams, I think it's very much worth doing.
Indeed.
Okay, so we're going to move into some more kind of in-depth interview questions where we're going to discuss sort of self-esteem and just sort of how that balances with psychological hardiness and resilience, like we've already been talking about. So I think at this point, just for the audience, it's kind of helpful to kind of recount how important self-esteem is and how it's interlinked with who we are and how we act. So I know we've already defined self-esteem, but can you kind of outline how important it is for our daily life?
Indeed. An individual's self-esteem, Tia, is greatly influential in our daily life. And what do I mean by that? If we are enjoying good self-esteem, that is, we're optimistic, we're hopeful, we're positive, even though we may still be experiencing life's events, if we ultimately have a resilient approach to life, that is, in the face of adversity and difficulties, we can recover and return, can go again, then if that's the case, then we're more likely to be able to take risks. We're more likely to be able to face some of the predictable and unpredictable difficulties of life and continue to move forward. Whereas if we are not enjoying positive self-esteem, in fact, if we are experiencing low or diminished self-esteem, that will likely mean that we might be hopeless. We might feel disempowered. We might feel that our circumstances is out of our control, and we will then be less likely to take risks. We'll be less likely to apply for school or work or whatever it may be. We'll be less likely to seek out social connections and circumstances, and that will lead to a diminished day and life.
Yeah. So a lot of people obviously believe that self-esteem is sort of a part of that self-deprecating mindset, that lack of self-confidence. So I'm really interested to hear sort of what you think are some misconceptions about self-esteem. Personally, I think, and a lot of people I think believe this, and I'm definitely guilty of this, assuming that self-esteem is directly correlated with success, and you can only have high self-esteem if you have success. So from your experience and what you've told me so far, what are some misconceptions about self-esteem?
Thank you. That's an interesting example, Tia, that you cite, that self-esteem, a misconception or belief is that you need positive self-esteem to be successful. My experience is that's not always necessary. With regards to your very good question, the research demonstrates that one misconception that includes self-esteem is that enjoying positive self-esteem will itself evoke and create opportunities, circumstances, and awards and treasures to be successful, and will diminish challenges and difficulties. The belief is the mere belief. Sorry, that's alliteration. The misconception, Tio, is by merely believing and by conjuring up a positive thought, feeling, and emotion that you can conjure up success. Research demonstrates that that's unlikely to happen. Now, of course, you're more likely to give yourself every opportunity of being in a milieu or an environment where you can have opportunities to be successful if you are optimistic and have a positive, enjoy positive self-esteem. However, positive self-esteem by itself isn't enough. Rather, what we need is to be able to take action. And action behaviours, or an omission of behaviours, action can only be evoked when we have a will to take that action, that resilience, if you like. And we can only do that if we can reframe our self-esteem to one that is action-oriented. So it isn't merely about, I believe I'll be successful, and kind of sitting around and waiting to be successful, like they demonstrate in some of the particular recordings and podcasts and videos, which, by the way, they are typically selling a commercial product or service.
Right.
Rather, as a psychologist and a mental health practitioner, I recommend for people listening to evoke a positive mindset based around one of four attitudes. The first is, if I may, the first is, Tia, to adopt an attitude of altruism. How can my actions help myself, my loved ones, the community, and others? A second very, very helpful attitude to adopt is one of learning. How is undertaking this pathway or difficulty or facing this task going to help me learn and apply those learnings into the future? A third attitude that's very helpful to adopt is, how am I able to enjoy some hopefulness, empowerment, and control from my course of actions? And a fourth very, very helpful way that the research demonstrates is of adopting an attitude is based around the difficulties pass, that they're merely temporary, Tia. They're merely localized to a particular time, place, circumstance, or event, and that we'll get through it. And by adopting an attitude that is reframing cognitively to one of those four ways of thinking, will not only adopt a positive attitude and self-esteem, it will lead us to take action.
Thank you so much. That's such an incredible answer. I guess my key question here now would be, and I feel like this is like something that I need a bit of clarification on, and I think others would obviously as well. What is the difference? If there is a difference, I'm going to assume there is a difference, but I'll ask you anyway.
Absolutely. May I gleefully jump in here with an example?
Okay.
In fact, I'm going to use a metaphor. The metaphor is if one of your listeners is standing in front of a herd of rampaging wildebeest, merely adopting a positive attitude, having the most ebulliently positive self-esteem, yet not taking any action, will lead to that listener being run over by the herd of wildebeest. Whereas adopting an attitude of action, according to one of those four ways of thinking, altruism, learning, that it's merely temporary and that we're empowered, will not only enable you to adopt a positive attitude, you'll then have the ability to take action to run sideways that way whilst the wildebeest run that way, and you'll be safe.
Well, yeah, that's great. prefer not to get run over by wildebeest.
Correct.
So your area of expertise is building resilience, both mentally and physically. And I find this really interesting how you've connected those two aspects because they are really important. Our mindset is directly connected to our physical behaviors.
Indeed.
And you can see this in terms of sort of like physical violence. So you wrote a handbook titled, and we have it right here, Wrestling with Resilience, in which you focus on how to develop resilience and mental toughness to perform under stress and pressure.
Correct.
One of the steps that you mentioned is maintaining self-esteem. Can you kind of expand on what that connection is between that physical sort of resilience and behavior and that mental self-esteem?
Absolutely. Tia, that's a very wise question, and thank you for mentioning the handbook. There's a very, very consistently strong association and connection between our bodies, our physiology, the way that we feel, and our mind, our thoughts, and the words that happen inside our mind. And not only is that experienced by listeners, I would deduce, when they have a particular attitude, when their self-esteem is feeling a particular way, and then their body feels that commensurate that same way, we can also greatly improve our mental health through bodily behaviours and bodily actions and so forth. For example, I recommend to your listeners to have a daily regime where every day they undertake a challenging physical activity. Every day they should change a daily physical habit. For example, Tia, what hand do you brush your teeth with?
Sorry.
When you brush your teeth, which hand do you use?
I use my right hand.
Okay, so tomorrow I'd like you to use your left.
Okay.
And that physical change will help stimulate different regions in your brain and help your mental health.
Oh, that's so interesting. So literally just like changing the
Yeah, absolutely.
That feels really weird.
Yeah, of course it does. Of course it does.
Okay, no, yeah. I think it's it's such a complicated and sort of, I feel like sometimes not well understood connection between that physical and mental thing. And I feel like as humans we acknowledge it, but it's not something that we're entirely aware of. Like when you get nervous or anxious and your stomach starts to get sore and you're like, okay, like I'm not really, why is my stomach sore? So yeah, I think it's an area of research that, it could be really helpful for people to learn about. And just going to your GP and discussing it, I think is really helpful.
I agree wholeheartedly. I do believe that the connection between our mind and our body has been overlooked in treatment. Whereas what I always endeavour to do when I work with my valued patients and clients, Tia, is to give them techniques that both address the mental thoughts and matters that they're experiencing, and also give them techniques that will help ease the physical symptoms that they're demonstrating as well.
Yeah, and I think personally I found, usually when you'll talk to someone and they'll be like, oh, like if you're struggling, with this mentally or whatever, you should go work out, you should do some exercise. And I think a lot of people think like, oh, now I have to like work out and do, like squats and stuff like that. But it's a lot about finding a form of physical exercise that you enjoy.
Correct.
Like I'm a Latin dancer and that has helped me so much. Like I had a dance class yesterday, and previous to that I was like, oh, like it's cold, I'm not really feeling like, I don't really want to go. Like I'd rather just stay at home and in my jammies and keep warm. But then you step into that dance class and the music's there and you're having fun, and I walk out on such like a buzz, and I will end up being so much better for it for the rest of the day and the week. So yeah, it's about finding that thing that you enjoy doing. I guess my question would be, is there a physical exercise that you do that you know is going to like keep you like and improve your self-esteem?
Absolutely. Martial arts. So
Yeah.
I'm a lifelong martial artist. By the way, I particularly like your evocative description of the Latin dance, and let me convey to you that that's a savouring activity for you, clearly. Clearly one that
Definitely.
not only did you enjoy, you were able to reframe the initial, oh, it's warm in bed, I don't want to go, to enjoying and being able to derive benefits the next day. For me, it's the martial arts. I'm a lifelong martial artist, and started when I was 4 in the Japanese martial art of judo, continued training in the Japanese martial art of karate, discovered Brazilian jiu-jitsu and wrestling, and have specialised pretty much as a wrestling coach and
Okay.
grappling combat sports expert, if you like. And any time I coach or practice, so for example, tonight I'm coaching tackling and teaching resilience to the Aberfeldy senior women's and under 18 girls footy teams.
Awesome.
And the mere practice of that makes me feel fantastic.
Yeah. Oh, that's so inspiring.
Thank
So
you.
obviously, as we've talked about, low self-esteem is something that many of us have struggled with at some point in our lives. According to research by Dr. Joe Rubino, it is estimated that 85% of Americans suffer from low self-esteem. There are a lot of factors that contribute to this, that contribute to sort of your perception of low self-esteem, etc. And unsurprisingly, a lot of these factors are sort of related to marginalized groups. But for obvious reasons, everyone struggles with self-esteem. So in saying that, why do you think, and this can be an academic point of view or opinionated, why do you think humans innately struggle with self-esteem?
In training during childhood, I believe would be one of the key factors, Tia. You mentioned that marginalisation is a key factor. I'd like to endorse that and build that any time individuals feel unsafe or oppressed or attacked, then that will greatly diminish their self-esteem. For example, as we're recording this at the moment, the Russian invasion of the Ukraine continues. Ukrainian refugees and citizens would be fearing for their lives at the moment, and their self-esteem would be commensurately very, very low. My heart bleeds for them.
Yeah. No, it's really devastating how those exterior things that you can't control can really affect that self-esteem. But considering the importance of self-esteem, and obviously, we all go through points in our life, and, even if it's a major life event where your self-esteem is not going to be so great, and that varies from one person to the other. But do you have any tips or strategies on how to sort of maintain self-esteem from, before this thing has happened and you're feeling fine through it, and then like out the other side, sort of to maintain that throughout, whatever stressful situation it is that you're going through?
Indeed. Let me paraphrase your question to check for my understanding here, Tia. How can we manage our self-esteem before, during, and after a stressful event or moment? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think that it's unrealistic to be able to maintain our self-esteem during a stressful, particularly a distressing moment, event, or person. What we can realistically aspire to do is to recover our self-esteem after we've faced and moved through or diminished that difficult person, situation, or event. The performance psychology profession has a definition of the word thriving that I'd like to evoke here.
Yeah.
in common lexicon, in everyday usage, thriving often conjures up a feeling that everything's going well, we're successful, we're enjoying a wonderful time and so forth. Whereas in performance psychology, we use the term thriving to refer to a sports person or a team who is enduring terrible challenges. It could be constant pain, it could be fatigue, it could be injury, sleep deprivation, a powerful opponent, and that the athlete or sports person, he, she, or they, are not only enduring and tolerating those difficulties, they're still performing. They're not necessarily winning or even performing well, yet they're continuing to perform whilst they're tolerating and experiencing all these difficulties. And we call that thriving in performance psychology, to encourage our athletes and sports people to mentally prepare for that, particularly you mentioned before, during, and after. So in the before a predictably difficult time, to be able to steel themselves, to evoke that grit and mental toughness to endure and accept that their self-esteem will drop during that terrible event, yet then look to the future afterwards to then recover.
Okay, yeah, I think, yeah, like you said, obviously maintaining self-esteem during that situation is obviously going to be the hardest, and not always successful, and it's going to lower. It's kind of
Absolutely,
inevitable.
but by definition, because we're experiencing deleterious factors and so forth, I put it to you that there would be no one of sound mental health who is experiencing elevated self-esteem during this current war in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
Understandably, because of these external factors out of that individual's control. However, with a view to the future, if a ceasefire is negotiated, then at that point in time, when the bombings and the attacks cease and they can recover their community, then they can look with hopefulness to recover their self-esteem and their lives.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's an important point that you've sort of noted, is that in the moments when you are struggling and when, you're in a stressful situation, like, remind yourself that you don't have to be completely okay. And that's really important, because I feel like a lot of people put pressure on themselves, like, oh, I should be fine. Like, I should be able to deal with this. Like, other people have it so much harder, et cetera, et cetera. But in that moment, when you're in that situation, and obviously we can point to so many different things happening in the world right now where people are not going to have high self-esteem. And it's just important for you to recognize this as a form of like self-care. Like, okay, I'm not going to be okay, and I'm sort of not feeling too great. And that is in and itself like, okay, obviously I'm going to try and, help myself as much as I can.
Sure.
But if there are days where I'm really not feeling great, you don't beat yourself up about it.
Correct. In fact, let me jump in gleefully and strongly endorse that sentiment. It's important for our listeners to understand that there'll be times where, due to challenges, we don't feel strong, we don't feel okay, we don't feel positive. And that is what it is. And what we can do is seek to bolster and recover our self-esteem when it's safe to do so. Yet the priority isn't our self-esteem in those moments of challenge. The priority is our psychological and physical safety. So that, which is not the same as self-esteem. And you also cited or used a really regular practice, and you do that very well, which is the practice of using perspective and telling ourselves, oh, well, I'm merely, for example, I'm merely in debt because of X, Y, Z. Look over there, there's a war, I should be feeling okay. Well, no, losing money or receiving fraud is a distressing moment, and it's okay to be upset. The use of perspective, I think, is overplayed. because it doesn't validate the concerns and matters that we're currently experiencing.
Yeah, especially like sort of just in this weird era historical event that we're going through in the past sort of 3 to 4 years. Yeah, I think having that perspective has sort of been really hard to come to grasp with. I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, my COVID situation is worse than your COVID situation, and my restrictions are worse than your restrictions. So, like, why are you like whinging, blah, blah, blah. But then, like you said, that sort of doesn't validate how you're
Correct.
feeling, and that
Correct.
doesn't help with
Correct.
you moving forward.
Yeah, everybody's experience is unique and different. And whilst, particularly maybe during childhood, whilst it might be at times a useful parental tool or teaching tool to cite perspective, it's actually overplayed.
Okay, interesting. So, in terms of you mentioned sort of like in childhood having that perspective. Do you have like an example maybe to go
Yeah,
with that?
sure.
Or?
In the 1980s or so, it was a common practice if a child fell over and maybe scraped his, her, or their knee, then a parent might say, "Oh, look, that's nothing." Timmy down the road broke his leg. You should
Yeah.
feel better about yourself. Whereas we now know.
I'm familiar with this practice.
Let me offer you some counselling. Tia, my response to 2022 is to comfort the child.
Yeah.
And don't use perspective.
Yeah, exactly. I think the whole sort of suck it up princess perspective can definitely leave. And I think it's a part of Australian culture and a lot of different cultures. And we're progressing. I think as a society, we're learning these new things about ourselves and how to sort of build that resilience, but be caring and like loving in the process. And that's always a bit of a balancing act, and we're not always going to get it right, but it's important for us to continue learning about it.
I strongly endorse that. And it's your generation, Tia and Jerry's generation, that is effecting this wonderful change. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. We're doing our best. So we've talked a bit about psychological hardiness so far, but I'm curious sort of like as to what this is, because psychological hardiness from the research was first considered by Kabasa, and it was recognized as a collection of sort of personality characteristics and that level of resistance in the face of stressful situations. Is that how you would define psychological hardiness?
Thank you. That's a good research. That's a very, very historical reference. Now we refer to, and then that progressed into the 1970s and 1980s, where sport and exercise psychology would refer to mental toughness and grit. And now we use the term, in performance psychology, we use the term resilience in the following manner. When faced with difficulty in circumstances, resilience is the ability to recover your performance and to continue on. Whereas in the past, they would use really evocative words like grit and hardiness, and you've got to jut out your jaw and your chest and crawl over those rocks, and all these sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's about everyday people experiencing stressors, and there's been no greater stressor for our global community than COVID-19. So it's being able to continue to move on and move forward. And as we discussed moments ago, and also be comfortable with not being okay as well.
Yeah.
And seeking help.
Yes, seeking help, so important. I guess one of the questions that I would sort of have that leads off from that, you work obviously a lot in sports and coaching and, helping people in that field. When someone is injured from like a sports injury, or I'm guilty of a couple dance injuries, how have you seen sort of people, and how would you encourage people to sort of motivate themselves when they're rehabilitating? Because I've definitely had some injuries that have caused some mental side effects when you're not you're not participating in what you were previously, which for some people, for me, was like familiarity. And then, you've got this injury that is associated with this thing that previously brought you comfort, etc. How have you sort of seen, sports players, etc., how have you seen them rehabilitate psychologically when they've suffered from a physical injury?
Challenges when a sports person or an individual sustains an injury include, Tia, what you've disclosed very honestly, which is that isolation away from that activity that brought you such enjoyment. I'd also deduce probably isolation from the social connections that you have during dance when you're injured as well. So individuals experience those two strong deleterious side effects, as well as the pain, as well as diminished function, as well as diminished self-esteem and diminished self-image, and sometimes at its worst, hopelessness. Yeah. So individuals who are injured or ill or unwell experience those factors and more. There's whole research journals and studies dedicated towards the psychology of exercise rehabilitation and rehabilitation from injury and illness. What I'll praise all of that research down to a couple of research observations. The first is how important it is for individuals to draw upon friends and family, and if they are sports people, draw upon their club for support, because it's incredibly isolating. It's incredibly diminishing to self-esteem, particularly by a person who may heretofore have identified oneself through the pursuit of that activity, and suddenly it's diminished. Thirdly, I strongly encourage the active recruitment of that person to be involved. So if it's a sport, give them a role where they can be an assistant coach or...
still connected.
Correct. Absolutely. Kaboom. Outstanding. Great observation. And then fourthly, to make sure, that we celebrate key milestones. We had and this is on the public, in the public environment, public sphere, at the Western Bulldogs in our current AFLW season, we had a player, Deanna Berry, who successfully returned from a anterior cruciate ligament and ACL injury and surgery last season. And as she returned as a club during these milestones, the first time she ran successfully, we all stopped, watched her and clapped and savoured with her.
That's so beautiful.
Her first return to contact activities, and in fact I was recruited to bump her around and tackle her safely on her return for that. And then she was able to return mid-season for a game, and she kicked a goal in her second game, I believe, and we all got around her and celebrated. So being able to celebrate and savour key milestones is also very, very helpful to recovering self-esteem.
Yeah, I think, all of those things you listed are so important in recovering your self-esteem, after having an injury, whether it's sports related or not, because I think so many people struggle with that, and it's something that I think you're not really prepared for when you have that injury. And
how can you be?
Yeah, exactly. No one goes out and purposefully gets a physical injury.
Correct. Great question.
So now that we've kind of discussed psychological hardiness, there are sort of components that come with that, like we've talked about. Do you think that psychological hardiness and self-esteem sort of require like things from exterior peoples, or do you think that they can sort of be harnessed just by yourself? Like, do you think that you need to go out?
Can you develop it?
Yes, can you develop it by yourself? Thank you.
I won't refer to psychological hardiness, rather I'll use the term resilience. Resilience can absolutely be developed. It used to be believed that psychological grit and hardiness and mental toughness was an innate quality that only the best and bravest and so forth could furnace, and I think I just used a noun as a verb, by the way, and enjoy. Whereas in reality, what we actually know is that there are particular attributes that help someone become resilient, and they can be taught through evidence-based skills and can be measured through psychometric measures and instruments. So my very, very positive response to your good question is it absolutely is influenced by external people and factors, because we can teach and develop resilience. And in fact, part of my work as a psychologist includes working with schools and education bodies to integrate some evidence-based activities into schoolwork.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that later. So we're going to jump over to a little bit of a different segment now. So this is the open mic segment, where you as the guest have the opportunity to talk about anything that you're passionate about or anything that you want to put on the table. It doesn't have to be related to what we've talked about today. But yes, so this is your chance to be the podcast host.
Thank you. It's a responsibility I take very, very seriously. Let me gush very, very positively about, firstly, the opportunity to share some ideas and thoughts today. Thank you, Tia.
You're very welcome.
An area that I was quite keen to be able to talk about today, so thank you for the open mic, was the importance of your listeners having some daily habits to help them develop their mental health, help them build positive self-esteem. And I've mentioned some of them already. I'll reiterate. Some daily habits to improve your self-esteem include drawing upon friends and family, playing with pets and immersing yourself in nature, changing a daily habit. So you'll be brushing your teeth with
my left hand tomorrow.
Your left hand tomorrow. Very, very good. Try not to make too much of a mess in the bathroom. Your brother won't be too impressed if you do. Fourthly, undertaking a challenging physical activity. So it might be undertaking a new Latin dance for the first time. Moreover, reading, writing, watching and listening to something enjoyable, and undertaking that regularly, savouring and being present in positive moments, and finally enjoying sleep.
Enjoying sleep. Okay, that last bit I'm a bit curious about. When you say enjoying sleep, can you kind of expand on that a little
absolutely.
bit?
I use the term enjoying deliberately. A lot of people see sleep almost as an operational matter that they have to get done.
Yep.
And to the degree that they'll cheat themselves, they'll stay up as late as possible, and then only go to sleep when they are getting drowsy, or they will steal from themselves. They have little cat naps throughout the day, The research consistently demonstrates that evening sleep, or for those of you listeners who are shift workers, at the end of your shift, that time of sleep is super important for restoration, for repairing our bodies and our minds. And for me, it's all about enjoying your sleep, undertaking your gratitude activities, and then going to bed with your little favorite teddy bear and looking forward to the adventures that you'll have in the land of Nod.
That's so nice. Like you said, I've sort of always thought about it as operational. Like, it's just something I do.
Of course, yeah.
This is what I have to do to get to the next day. So I kind of have to do this thing. Learning to enjoy it, I think, is a very interesting concept that I'm going to try out. That's definitely
that's my gift to you.
Thank you.
I encourage you to endeavour to really prolong your sleep as well. So really enjoy it.
Are you giving me an excuse to sleep in, or?
I do with that advice what you wish, Tia.
Thank you. Okay, that's how I'll take it. Wonderful. Okay, so now we're going to move to questions from the audience. So we've got a couple questions. We may not get through all of them, but I don't know. Let me see which one I think is the most interesting. Okay. I guess the question that we're going to go with is, I like this one. When we were teenagers, our self-esteem seems to be in the lowest point of our lives. Will it affect one's adulthood as well as in the long-term period?
Can do. It can.
Okay.
Depending upon what actions we take from childhood and teenagehood into young adulthood, if we have no bolstering experiences nor receive any training or psychological or medical or psychiatric support, then it is plausible.
Okay, that's very interesting. In terms of looking at that from when because I think people are like, we grow out of it, like that sort of thing.
No, in fact, one of the reasons, Tia, for the great concern at the moment about the mental health of our young people during this 3 to 4 years of pandemic and isolation from their peers, homeschooling, the dread and fear, is that they're sustaining psychological injury that, unless deliberately addressed, will persevere and persist into young adulthood.
Oh, that is a scary thought.
Absolutely, which is why
we must look after our young people.
Correct, which is why there's such a focus on mental health at the moment.
Yeah, that is something that definitely needs to be worked on.
Indeed.
In schools and at home.
Indeed.
Okay, our next question is, do you have any advice for an individual whose low self-esteem relies on external factors outside their control?
Sure. It might be very, very helpful for that individual to undergo a facilitated discussion with an expert psychologist or psychiatrist, where we endeavour to identify some factors within his, her, or their control that are enjoyable, that are pleasing, that are comforting. If pleasure is too far an aspiration, that are merely comforting or relieving, as in diminishes pain or isolation, and to then demonstrate to that individual how those particular factors are within their influence and control. And in that way, we can start slowly creating a sense of an internal locus of control, as opposed to an external locus of control. That refers to, so that individual genuinely can believe and feel that they have, through their own actions, some impact upon how they're thinking and feeling.
Thank you. So, and our next question is self-esteem attributed to an individual's personality, or is it experience-based?
Both.
Okay. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. We are not an island unto ourselves, meaning that the particular experiences, memories, and training and conditioning experiences, the significant people in our lives, the the way that we respond, react, think, feel, behave, all combine together to form our personality and shape our temperament. And our temperament is the way we actually behave and embody our personality. And that is both innate and also external. Case in point, if we over exert ourselves and become really, really fatigued, that will often affect our ability to undertake complex problem solving, or indeed drive, when we're really, really fatigued.
Yeah.
So our mental state is greatly influenced by our external state. And then to nest a loop that you raised earlier, which shows us the strong association between mind and body.
Thank you for that. One of my questions, I guess I'll add to the audience questions. Obviously, we've been discussing self-esteem, low self-esteem, etc. Is there, now because they have two different titles and names, is there a sort of scientific or academic difference between self-esteem and confidence?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Self-esteem and confidence differ insofar as our self-esteem is or can be described as the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that permeate us. And I often refer to it being on two or three continuums. One is about hope. So we can be hopeless all the way to be hopeful. Another is about power. We can be disempowered all the way over to be powerful and feel in control. And to me, they underpin self-esteem, where self-confidence is often the situational deployment of self-efficacy. And what that means is your normal feeling of assuredness, your willingness to take risks, your ability to utter sentiments, all of that comes under self-confidence.
Okay, thank you. That makes more sense now. Another audience question that we have is, what should I do when I'm having poor self-esteem and not feeling happy with myself?
In the absence of any other information, I would recommend to that person, firstly, make sure that he, she, or they are safe, and then undertake those 8 or so daily habits that I mentioned in your open mic section earlier.
Yep. If you want to recap that, just rewind, guys. Okay. And our final question would be, does having low self-esteem mean that someone is not resilient?
Of course not.
Okay.
Rather, it might mean that they are experiencing. Do you remember earlier, Tia, your very good question about how can we seek to manage resilience before, during, or after a particular stressful event?
Yep.
It might mean that they're here, or that they're here looking with foreboding and anxiety and worry towards a predictably looming difficult stress or event, like a bully, something like that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily mean, just because someone has low self-esteem, it doesn't mean that they lack resilience, because if they are able to endure this difficulty, I will describe them as thriving, using that earlier term for performance psychology. And then we recover their self-esteem after they're safe.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, that answers all those questions. Thank you so much for that. I hope that was helpful for the audience and our listeners. So we're pretty much all wrapped up now. For those who are curious, where can they grab a copy of your book?
Thank you very much. My book, Wrestling with Resilience.
I got mine signed.
You do. Is readily available online as a paperback through Amazon, Goodreads, and other online providers.
Awesome.
It is also available in store at the Bulldog shop through the Western Bulldogs Football Club.
That's cool.
And I will sign copies for anybody who wishes to contact me through my own website, may I?
Yeah, go for it.
www.christophershen.com.au. If anybody would like a signed copy, please contact me and I'll arrange that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I really look forward to reading this and going through it and just, learning more about, physical, resilience and mental resilience. And they're all very important things. So I think we can all learn something from your book. So thank you so much for coming today, Christopher. It has been such a lovely time. I feel really good now. You've been such a great guest. I feel like really nice and happy now. So I hope those listening also enjoyed that. And I hope you guys are also feeling nice and happy now. So once again, thank you, Christopher, so much. And to our listeners, don't forget to like and subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on, and we'll see you next week. Bye. You have been listening to Bouncing Back, the Personal Resilience Science Insights podcast produced by the Life Management Science Labs. Listen to episodes from LMSL's 10 Life Management Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or other podcasting apps on your smartphone. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps others find us and us grow to bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at pr.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Tia Harmer. Thanks for tuning in.